My name's Ted Summers. I am the co-host of Working Dog Radio. I am the program and training director for HRD Police K9, and I own Torchlight K9 based in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Let's break those three down. So podcasts.
Yep, podcast for Ray Allen is a great supporter of the podcast and has been for quite a while. We started about 3 years ago, and it was designed to fill a gap that we felt was an informational one. And my co-host and I, Eric Stambro from Van Ness K9, wanted to fill that gap and give canine handlers information that we felt was a little hard to access. So from its impetus, it was always about helping canine handlers that were out in the middle of nowhere that have no access to information readily, and at least put them in contact with resources that can help them, whether it be equipment resources, training resources, like people within the industry that are really good at what they do that they wouldn't have contact with otherwise. So that's where it started. It's kind of morphed into another beast altogether, but it's been an interesting project for sure. So the second one is HRD Police K9, stands for Highest Deployment K9. So Ray Murphy, myself, and Eric Stambro started that, and it's designed, which is what I'm teaching here at Blue Line here in St. Louis. It's about scenario-based training, and it really fills a gap or where we feel that there's a certain portion of this industry that only trains for certification standards, and then we have deployment standards, which are not the same. So Eric and I kind of developed a training program that we cover over 3 days to really give guys access to problem-solving skills and increase reliability for deployments for situations that aren't really tested or aren't really looked at. So it's been extremely successful. We were in front of 400 teams and from 25 states over the last 18 months. So it's been not a bad run. Got another one coming up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, if you're pretty quick. So looking forward to that. What was the last one? Oh, Torchlight.
Yep.
Torchlight K9, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's the company that I own with Alicia Brandt. Do police dogs, single purpose, dual purpose. We've got dogs in 18 states. Run handler schools, green dogs, pet training, everything else. So, yeah.
You guys are opening a new facility?
We are. 3,500 square foot facility with a 6,000 square foot outside yard. Indoor kennels, completely like sterile and clean on the inside. Floor drains are being built. We're gonna have classroom, places for handlers to stay. If you're there for a handler school, we'll have a bunkhouse. So we have it all inclusive. So when you get the dog from us, it can be all inclusive. Come stay there. I have a kitchen, shower, full deal.
So how'd you get started in K9?
So K9, interestingly enough, I got started by going to Europe, racing over there racing bikes and kind of generally goofing off, and I met some friends, and they asked us to come help catch dogs, and I'm like, you mean like on my bike? And they're like, yeah, on your bike. So no, I mean, at 19 years old, they're like, here, put this suit on. I'm like, what do I need this for? And they bring out this massive Malinois, and I thought I was gonna die. In hindsight, he probably wasn't that scary. I think he was kind of old, didn't have any teeth, but and then it just kind of snowballed. I never intended to be doing this. I brought back a Malinois, had some working Jack Russell Terriers, working Labradors, and kind of snowballed, and then started doing some detection work for some departments in Colorado for avalanche work and rescue work, and it just kind of moved in like down the line. So not really a traditional, but yeah.
How have you seen the podcast have an impact out there?
When we first started the podcast, when we got through the first about 30 episodes, we went to another conference, and we had access to the number of downloads, and I kind of that number in itself didn't really have a whole lot of context to me. So we went to another conference, and I had a kid, it was a younger handler, walk up to me, and he's like, man, I listen to every episode. I'm like, you do? I mean, because to me, it's just me and Eric sitting there having a conversation we normally have anyway with somebody that we know about something that we all know about. So, it wasn't ever really designed to be, it was more designed to be an entertainment thing, and it's turned out to be extremely educational. There was a definite point where I realized that what we were doing was having an impact, and this kid came up to me, and he'd been a police officer for 5 years, small department, and he'd been a canine handler for 2. And he was in a training group of 6, and he was the most experienced canine handler. And I kind of made a face, and I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. And he was like, dude, he handles a dual purpose dog. He got a 10-day school. And I'm like, holy cow. Okay. And I kind of stood there and looked at him. He's like, dude, I've gotten so much information out of just listening to you guys. At least I know where to look and what to look for and and he was like, my supervisors is the same thing. I think his department had like 40 people, so it's not large. It was a 1-dog department. And like his sergeant didn't even know, like nobody in the command staff knew anything. Like, well, we got a dog, now what? So he was like, it's helped immensely. And I've caught up with that kid. Training group is now like 15. They added another dog. They're all now USPCA certified, national standard. And, I didn't have any direct like hands-on, like, this is how you do this. But, he was like, man, I listened to the episode and I caught up with him and he said, I send some of these episodes to like my supervisors where we have like supervisor stuff in it. And, they've been in contact with Michael Kamisic, who's one of our guys here. And I think one of their supervisors went to that. And then, they've been in contact with Rigney, who's also here. And so, it's good because we put most canine handlers are very, very motivated and very good. They just need help. And I tell people all the time, they're cops first and canine handlers second. Like I live in this bubble. Right? Like I do dogs and that's all I do, right? So I sometimes forget that they don't have the resources or the access to information that we do. And they still have to be a police officer, social worker, all the other things. And if the podcast helps them get in contact and fix some of these issues, then I'm golden. And that's really where I think the impact of the podcast is really having that. And, Eric and I are funny, which helps. So
Right. Tell us about your history with Ray Allen.
So before we even had the podcast, I was a customer of Ray Allen. We bought stuff. I've got a kennel. I have a double agitation. I have a 2-inch agitation leather kennel or collar at the kennel that I swear is like 18 years old.
Yeah.
It's been on hundreds of patrol dogs, and I use it for back tie work. And it's the one that's got the copper rivet in it and the big, and and I keep looking at it and I'm like, maybe next year I'll replace it. So, and it's great. I mean, I use it all the time. It's got a handle on it and it just stays tied to my back tie. And that's where my dogs go if they're going to be on a collar instead of a harness for back tie work. So even before then, and then for our handlers, I would send them there, and administrators, because administrators love to write one check.
Right.
If they could buy a dog from Ray Allen, they probably would, and a car.
Yeah.
Like you just buy a Ford Explorer with an insert and get a dog with it, they would write one check and be happy.
Right.
So like literally the only thing you guys don't have, I think, is cars and handlers and dogs.
Yeah.
You could probably give me a handler.
Yeah. Could say a handler probably.
So I hate, and I do this with grocery shopping too. Like I don't want to have to go to more than one store. Like if I have to, I'm just like, I don't need it. So you guys have, and the reason that I've gone to you and Eric for that matter too, is because you guys always have everything anyway. So I can get everything from one place and I don't have to worry about it. So,
Right.
Yeah. And then of course you guys are supporters of the podcast, which has been a fantastic relationship. And, Eric and I both, and everybody at the podcast, we fundamentally believe that you guys have one of the best operations and have the best equipment without a doubt. So, I mean, even before we started using it.
Tell us something funny, especially like the hidden the under gauntlet that you use and like the text messages you get from me.
So, the Primal K9 decoy armor, right? So it came out and you had been like, hey, I want you to test this stuff. So, let me know how it works. This goes under a suit. I'm like, oh, perfect. So I get it, and I'm like, yeah, it's super thin leather, it's well made. I'm like, it fits really well. I'm like, yeah. So I went to the dollar store and I got a hobo jacket, for like $5. Now I'm just doing which are essentially newspaper bites. Some of it gets out on social media and you send me a text and you're like, that is not the suit I meant. It goes under a bite suit. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so, and that's what, and you shouldn't use those. Definitely only on a back tie. Don't even do it. But if you do, it's only on a back tie.
Disclaimers on the website.
Disclaimers on the website now, like don't do what Hagner and Summers did.
Yeah, exactly.
Where do you want to go from here with your own work, and then maybe touch on where the podcast wants to go from here?
So the podcast is going to continue to do what the podcast does. It continues to grow. We're now over 1 million downloads. Depending on the cycle of when it's uploaded, we're usually one of the top 20 in the government section of iTunes. So it's a fairly large, and our listener base is definitely not just United States. Our second largest listener base is Australia, and then Norway, which is what I found fascinating. But it's going to continue to do what it's going to do. You know, when we started it, I had this massive Excel spreadsheet of people that I want to interview, and I'm not through it yet. There's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe that I think will be interesting. Eric and I are working on, or the crew at the podcast. The podcast is run by, there's about 6 people that work at the podcast. It's not just me and Eric sitting there. I mean, it's definitely a lot of work. We have some other projects related to it that are going to be in the works with hopefully like some Netflix stuff, and we'll see how that turns out, but that's a little ways down the road. And like I said a minute ago, like I live in a bubble, and my interest has always been K9. There's 100 different versions or 100 different jobs in law enforcement, and it's not that I don't care about those, but there's other people that do that stuff. There's defensive shooting guys, defensive driving, there's guys that do child pornography crimes, there's guys that do internet crimes, there's guys that do special investigation stuff, there's SWAT guys, like everybody has their individual thing, and mine has and always will be K9. So my interest has always been making sure that handlers and administrators are supported enough from the vendor side and from the podcast side or from wherever that they're able to do their job more effectively. I firmly believe that I don't care what year it is, there will always be a place for a well-trained and well-supported K9 unit, even if it's just one dog, in a modern law enforcement agency. I think that there are some problems that K9s solve that you cannot solve with manpower, and that won't ever change. So, but it's a very specialized, a highly, highly specialized part of law enforcement. It's a highly specialized part of dog training, and it's a highly technical and specialized portion of like federal case law, and it requires a village. It requires a bunch of people like me and Eric and you guys to support the dudes out chauffeuring assholes around in their car to go find dudes and find drugs. So, but ultimately that's where I want to stay, and it's probably where I'll stay, training dogs to find stuff and find people, and doing the podcast and making sure that the next generation of handlers and the current generation of handlers are supported and funded and given good information. And that's ultimately where we want to go. So it's on iTunes, it's on Google Play. You can tell Alexa, so go into your kitchen and say, hey, Alexa, play the most current episode of Working Dog Radio, and it comes up. You can listen to me while you're eating breakfast if you want. But it's at yeah, it's at workingdogradio.com. HRD Police K9 is hrdpoliceK9.com. All the seminars are there. We started a new SWAT integration thing. We've got some really talented instructors. In fact, one of them, Todd, and then Billy Sawyer, who's around here from Longmont. Billy is super squared away. Gavin Dwyer. We've got some other guys. Gavin's a former guy from Ranger Battalion. So we've got some really talented people there. And then, of course, we've got our decoy camps. We've got some really talented instructors. And then the normal HRD stuff, which is me and Eric and Ray, is still rocking and rolling. And I think we're booked out through the rest of the year. So that's all up. And then Torchlight K9, letter K number 9, is where you can find me. I do green dogs, finished dogs. I do pets if you want me to do pets. We do whatever you need us to do. So torchlightk9.com, and all the associated Instagrams and Facebooks are the same. So.